regular board meeting for Desert Water Agency to order. Some housekeeping. I'm asking that folks in the room silence their mobile devices, and those of you that are participating remotely, please silence your microphone until or unless you're ready to speak during public comment. Those who'd like to participate virtually can do so via the information that is posted on our agenda on our website. For discussion questions, I will call on directors in the following roll call order. Director Gracia, Director McKenna, Secretary Treasurer Bloomer, Vice President Bowman, and President Ortega, and all votes will be conducted via the roll call. And with that, we'll go to the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'd like to have Vice President Bowman lead us in that.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now, may we have the roll call, please?
Director Gracia,
Present.
Director McKenna,
Present.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
Present.
Vice President Bowman,
Present.
and President Ortega.
Present.
All present.
Thank you. So with that, I'm going to change things up a little bit on this agenda. And we are going to move item 9, which is a public hearing, to be before item 7, our action items. And with that, we will go to item 4, public comments on items not on the agenda. So this is time for members of the public to comment about items that are related to the business of the agency but are not on today's agenda. I'm asking you to keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and as provided in the Brown Act, we as a board are prohibited from acting on an item that's not listed on today's agenda. Ms. Hoffman, have we received any items ahead of this meeting?
No public comments have been
Okay,
received.
thank you. And item 5, similarly, it would be public comment for items that aren't listed on today's agenda. Again, that would be, we'd like you to keep those comments to no more than 3 minutes. Seeing none, we'll move to item 6, which is our consent calendar. Items listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by one motion of the board without discussion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a board member requests a specific item to be discussed or removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Are there any items on today's consent calendar that our director would like us to remove for further discussion? Seeing none, I will look for a motion to accept the consent calendar as
Motion to
presented.
accept the consent calendar.
I have a first from Vice President Bowman.
I'll second.
Second from Secretary Treasurer Bloomer. May we have the roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director McKenna,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now we'll move to our public hearing, but before we do that, I would like to have some input from staff, some questions from staff that I have, and we will start with our general counsel. Is he present? It looks like he may have dropped from the meeting.
No, I'm here, Mr.
Okay,
President. Can you
great.
hear me?
Mr. Riddell, you might recall that when I joined this board 4.5 years ago, that prior to my joining, I spoke with you and then General Manager Krause, thank you. I'm like, we've had so many. General Manager Krause. And I presented at that time a question about my ability to participate in business that had to do with turf removal programs. And for the benefit of everyone in this room, perhaps you could summarize that conversation and your counsel that you provided at that time.
Well, as I recall, and I hope what I said then is consistent with what I say now, but there is, the question, there's two kinds of interests that a person would need to think about. One is whether a decision before the board has a financial impact on your own property. And the second is whether it would, a financial decision or a decision would foreseeably have a financial impact on sources of income to you over the previous 12 months. I think that's what I said then. I think that's the rule. There are exceptions to that rule, however, and a couple of those, one is called the public generally exception. And so if what you're doing is acting on an item that affects a significant segment of the public or of your retail customer base, then that is, if it affects the significant segment in similar ways, then that is exempted from the disqualification requirement. And then the other would be, of course, if it's a ministerial action where the board's merely implementing a mandate that's coming down from some other authority like the state, that too would qualify for the exemption. So to make it simple, if there were a matter that came before the board that affected an individual who was a source of income to you during the previous 12 months, that would create for you a conflict. If it's not that, if it's an action that is a matter of policy that's going to affect a significant segment of the public in similar ways, then there's an exemption that you qualified for. And I hope that's consistent with what I said then. That's what I should have said.
And I think also you made a point just a moment ago about a ministerial action again, regarding an item coming from another entity like the state.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. General Manager Sines, do you have any further concerns about that or anything you'd like to add to that?
No, and this is something that, of course, we've discussed with legal counsel as well. And given that, these demands are coming down from, mandates are coming down from the state, I agree, this is, the actions that we're looking to take today are ministerial, implementing what the state has mandated that we do. So I do not have any further concerns at this time.
Thank you. Director Yort, can you tell us before we get into the meat of this next item, other than feedback you may have received from members of this board through the previous discussion that we had when we had this as a discussion item, or even perhaps from our conservation or public relations and conservation committee meetings in the past, has any one of the 5 directors been involved in the drafting of this particular ordinance that we're about to discuss?
No other board member has reached out or has been involved in the drafting of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Right, so now we're going to turn to the directors. Because apparently there was a concern by at least one of you about my participation in this next item. So I'm going to give each of you an opportunity to discuss that. Well, actually, not discuss that. I'm going to basically ask you yes or no whether you have a concern. I'm not looking for a long-winded, drawn-out answer. I'm looking for a simple response with a simple clarification if that's necessary. And we'll start with Director Gracia.
Well, I was contacted, quite frankly, from a citizen who is also a candidate for this board that raised this issue out of concern relating to comments that you made at, I believe, our last meeting when you discussed how you're meeting with condo associations on the regular. And after a description of what it is that you do as a profession, if it's not a direct conflict, it is a appearance of a conflict. And according to the State of California Fair Political Practices Commission, that is enough in itself for them to find that you should recuse yourself. Now, I personally am quite fine with the comments from staff and attorney about your continuing on this item. The problem that creates is if it doesn't pass with 4 votes, if it's short two votes, it could be found to be overturned.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we're not
No,
done.
no, I am
We're
do-
we're
no,
not done.
no,
You
we-
take 10 minutes setting this up. I'm going to take 10 minutes explaining.
I've already asked you to move on. Thank you. Director McKenna,
I have no concerns with you commenting and participating in this decision.
thank you. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
I don't have any concerns. Thanks.
thank you. Vice President Bowman,
None whatsoever.
thank you. So that was not a vote. That was my solicitation of your feedback, and I appreciate that. Thank you. So we will move on to item 9. This is the time and place for the public hearing on the adoption of ordinance number 80.
I believe you skipped something.
I did?
Item 7.
We moved that forward.
Oh,
Yeah, if you were paying attention 5 minutes ago.
trying to figure out.
Prohibiting potable water from being used to irrigate areas of non-functional turf. At this point, I would like to have our conservation staff members, Mr. Elliott and Mr. Valenciano, to present the report, please.
Hello, President Ortega, members of the board. Thank you for being
Morning.
here. It's good to see you all. We do have a staff report, but I want to make sure that we focus more on the presentation that we've prepared for you all because it includes a lot of the information that will be covered in this staff report as well. At the end of the presentation, if we want to go back and review the staff report in itself, we can do that. If everyone's okay with that, we can move forward to the presentation itself.
That'll be fine.
Okay, today we are introducing ordinance number 80 for your review and respectfully recommend its adoption. Ordinance 80, an ordinance of the Board of Directors of Desert Water Agency prohibiting potable water from being used to irrigate areas of non-functional turf, comes as a response to California's 2023 approval of AB 1572, a bill that bans the irrigation of non-functional turf areas on certain properties with potable water and requires that public water systems revise their regulations, ordinances, and policies to capture the legislative changes by January 1st, 2027. So this would be Desert Water Agency getting ahead of the curve, potentially approving an ordinance that will be required and giving our customers a good runway or a good amount of time to plan, prepare for these significant changes, let's say. But before we dive into the ordinance and the discussion of its details, I want to make sure that I give you a little bit of background and anyone listening on what led California to reach this point where it has this legislative and regulatory landscape that's proving to aim for water conservation, water use efficiency, but at the same time can be very challenging. So we can go to the next, okay, you're okay. California's water system is deeply affected by its unpredictable climate, weather patterns that are hard to predict, recurring drought conditions, extreme weather patterns as well, that are affecting snowpack, which directly correlates with our water allocation as a state water project contractor. So in light of these challenges, California legislatures passed several bills that have been aimed at securing a more sustainable water future for California, improving water use efficiency, increasing conservation, and building long-term reliance and resiliency in the face of ongoing climate changes. So to start with the first item on this list, these are important events that have occurred, decisions that have been made in California that have slowly trickled and built up to the situation where we're at now. First one on the list is the approval and the signing of AB 1668 and SB 606 in 2018. And that's essentially a water management planning effort that focuses on making sure that California is preparing itself for drought conditions, making sure that we're resilient in terms of providing that long-term water use efficiency, and developing standards to make sure that we're able to hit those markers. This, if you notice on the presentation slide, has an arrow that goes all the way to the bottom, item E, which we'll cover later, but it essentially took quite some time for the State Water Resource Control Board to develop these standards reporting methods for public water suppliers and agencies that they need to submit, report, and abide by to ensure that we are being conservation-minded and forward-thinking in terms of how we use our water supplies. Item B is not a California-based bill, but it's actually a Nevada AB 357 legislature that was approved because of the pressures that are existing on the Colorado River, the impacts on its flows, its water supplies, and how it trickles down to people who, or agencies, representatives who have rights to Colorado River. So overuse, prolonged drought, rising temperatures have all led to Nevada's legislature approving AB 356, which essentially prohibits the irrigation of non-functional turf as well in Nevada for any property that is not a single-family home by January 1st, 2027. So that date may sound familiar because it's the same date that California's AB 1572, which we're discussing today, that's the first date for compliance for certain properties and certain water customers in California. So little by little over the past few years, you've been hearing a slow rumble of changes with how we behave, how we interact and engage with our water, and what sort of habits we develop to make sure that we're being sustainable in light of all the challenges to our water here in California and our water supplies. So item C is Executive Order N722, which was signed by Governor Newsom in 2022. And that was as a response again to droughts and how severe things were getting, especially when we look at Central Valley in California and the water issues they were having, being that they're heavily focused on agriculture. And this was, again, temporary, an executive order, but it did ban the irrigation of non-functional turf areas for commercial, industrial, and institutional properties. Again, an echo. We're starting to hear these slow rumbles of what's to come. That did not stay in place forever. As you know, an executive order does not do that. It expired on June 5th, 2024. And so the hope was that it would cover us for some time, but we would still need to develop a more permanent solution to combat these climate water supply challenges in California. Now, item D is going to be what we're focusing on today, and that's AB 1572, which is the prohibition, the ban on irrigating non-functional turf areas with potable water. And so that will affect certain water customers in the state of California. It's focused on potable water, so if you're using potable water, which is drinking water, precious resources that we should be protecting, if you're using that to irrigate ornamental, non-functional turf areas that you're not really using in any functional respect, and we'll talk about that in detail a little bit later, you will no longer be able to irrigate those. And if you do, you could be facing potential fines. And the bill also does require that public water agencies update their policies, regulations, or ordinances to align with AB 1572. And the last item on this list is the Making Conservation a California Way of Life. Many of you have heard of this regulation already, but it's very closely related to what water agencies are having to overcome, because not only are we now faced with a water use objective, let's say, that you need to meet, not every area has the same urban water use objective or standards. And so that presents the challenge of having to look at your water portfolio and determining where you can make these conservation water reductions and sustainable savings. And just to give you a brief perspective, desert water agencies, urban water use objective water reduction requirement is around 42%. I mean, let's let that sink in for a little bit. 42%. Right, it's about 70% of water use in Southern California is outdoor irrigation water use. We can do a lot indoor-wise, but if we're looking at the situation and 70% of our water use is going towards potential non-functional turf areas, shouldn't it beg the question, we need to do something here? That's at the crux of what AB 1572 is getting at. That's why I always say it's closely related to making conservation a California way of life regulation. Although they're separate, they do behave very similarly. So that's a overview of the legislation or regulation that has occurred over the past few years. That leads us into our discussion on our ordinance that we're proposing. So now to discuss the ordinance, proposed ordinance number 80 really reflects a lot of what AB 1572 requires. So the prohibition of the irrigation of non-functional turf areas with the use of potable water. Again, this is for specific customers and their water customers and their properties. It does not apply to single-family homes. So something important to note. The ordinance applies to the following: departments of general services, local government properties, local or regional public agencies, public water systems like Desert Water Agency, commercial, industrial, institutional properties, HOAs, common interest development, common areas, apartment properties, community service organizations. And so depending on which one of those categories you're in, there is a phased-in approach to meet these compliance dates. And you can see those in item C here. So it starts January 1st, 2027. That's for government properties that have non-functional turf areas. January 1st, 2028, commercial, industrial, institutional properties. January 1st, 2029, that's HOAs and common interest development, common areas. January 1st, 2031, governmental properties that fall within a disadvantaged community area. And so to provide some more reference, what Desert Water Agency has been doing over the past few years is provide our customers, our commercial HOA customers, with what's called a water walkthrough. And on that water walkthrough, we discuss methods, strategy that is specific to that property itself on how to save water, how to conserve, how to update their systems and infrastructure to make sure that we're instilling conservation-minded efforts and also helping them improve their systems to provide long-term change rather than a change for a few months or a day or two. And so in discussing these items and this information with our HOA customers and commercial customers, we've noticed that they're aware of the coming regulation and prohibition on non-functional turf irrigation ban, but there's no substantive pen to paper ordinance yet for them to review so that they can then plan and make decisions. We have to remember that these decisions are important. They require an investment. They require oftentimes board approval. There are also conflicting interests in an HOA community or a commercial industrial property that require them to consider how much of their budget they can dedicate it towards fixing their roof, redoing their asphalting, their parking lots, now non-functional turf removal. So we want to make sure that we're ahead of the curve. We want to make sure that we're providing our customers enough time to prepare. I must remind you that not every agency or not every region is going to enforce this the same. Let's face the facts. We're in a big desert. It's beautiful, sure. I've lived here my whole life. I love it. I've seen it change myself. But it's a desert, and as we've noticed, water scarcity is becoming more and more prevalent. on a yearly basis, we can never really depend on how much water we're going to get from our state water project allocation because we can never predict that snowpack. We import water here. We see that water coming through the whitewater wash, right? And not every year is the same. Sometimes it's a 5% allocation, sometimes it's 100%. But recently, more often than not, it's not 100% allocation. And so in light of that, we need to make sure we're making decisions to prepare for that, especially if AB 1572 already requires that we update our policies, regulations, or ordinances. So I hope that gives you an idea of who is going to be affected by the ordinance, what the dates for compliance are moving forward. And one other note, single-family homes are not affected, as I mentioned, but also properties that use recycled water to irrigate turf, it's not affected by this ordinance or the legislation either. So if you have a golf course that you're irrigating with recycled water, it wouldn't be affected. But also golf courses do have a dedicated purpose. So we'll discuss that in a bit. Next slide. Here we go. So functional turf versus non-functional turf. Just to start off with the definition, functional turf is existing turf grass areas that have a clear dedicated function, are used regularly, provide a recreational benefit to the community, property, are an essential part of a commercial service or operation, provide reasonable spacing and safe access, have a history of programmed events past, present, and future, or they are future turf installations planned for a property which meet the requirements of functional turf. And if you can look on the presentation slide, you'll notice a few examples of what would be considered functional turf, as per the definition we just covered. So top left corner, you see the Palm Springs football field, soccer field. Many things happen there. Band practices, right? There's a clear function. You can just go on for days on how you could use that area. In the middle, top middle, you see a golf course. Dedicated function. And we hear this all the time. Well, hey, we have a bunch of golf courses and we're using a lot of, yes, but there's a clear function there. And again, living here my entire life, we can't deny the fact that golf courses are a huge part of the draw for people to come to the valley, an activity to do outdoors. And so, clear function. Top right-hand corner, we see a public area in Palm Springs that has a lawn area that's adjacent to a concert stage. And I've been there before. I've seen events happen there before myself personally. People walk around there, they can picnic. And so it provides a public use, a benefit to the community, and it has a clear function. Parks, concerts, playgrounds, anything of that nature that provides clear function to the public, general public, is seen as functional. Bottom left-hand corner, we see a dog park. A lot of dogs running around. It's a fenced-in area. It's a dedicated dog park, right? Well, it can also be something that a community self-identifies as a functional, dedicated dog area. But dog areas can't be spread out about a property all over the place. We want to make sure that it's localized and it's clearly identified as a pet area. But there you get an example. If you see a fenced-in dog park with dog signs, potty bags, benches, those are clear dog parks. In the middle, bottom middle, we'll see a fountain that's running, green grass around it with a pond or a lake. That's actually recycled water. Again, a reminder, recycled water, if you're irrigating grass areas, even if they would be considered non-functional turf, if you're using recycled water, it would not be impacted by the legislation or this ordinance. Bottom right-hand corner, community use events. If you're having events, charity drives, weddings, picnics, or things of that nature, there's a clear function there. And in our definition of non-functional turf, we did include a history to be able to produce a history of functional use. Of course, there are special circumstances, and we're always going to consider those, but we want to make sure that you have been using it as a functional property, and you have a history of doing so. And if you plan on renovating or updating your landscapes to make sure you incorporate functionality, that's something that can be considered as well, but we want to make sure that a lot of thought is put towards what would actually be functional, because I remind you, we have a 42% water reduction required by the urban water use objective. And I think the state is aware of these challenges that California faces. And the intention of these regulations, the many that we covered in our introduction, the intent is to save water. And it will be a change of lifestyle. And a change of lifestyle isn't always the most pleasant thing to do, but sometimes it's necessary. And so this gives you a brief idea of what functional would look like. If we go to the next slide, we'll see what some non-functional turf areas could look like. So the definition of non-functional turf is going to be rather straightforward, focuses back on what functional is, but here it is. Turf areas that do not meet the required conditions and criteria as identified in the functional turf definition within the ordinance. And so typically when you see a grass area that's in public rights of way or frontage or parking lots, medians, roundabouts, those are going to be areas that no one's really using, no one plays in, they're not safe to play in, you can't take your grandchildren or your children to play, you can't run your dog on it because it's right next to a road and that's unsafe for the dog and any people driving by. So those would be seen as non-functional turf areas. And they're also smaller areas, and we have to think about the irrigation challenges that lie there, how difficult they are to irrigate, how much water goes towards the grass rather than towards the pavement, the sidewalks. And we see that, and the state sees that as an area that is non-functional, and irrigating it with drinking water, potable water, is seen as wasteful. If we look at the middle section of this slide, we'll see common areas in an HOA or common interest development. The one on top shows a before and after of a corner area that's directly adjacent to one of the units at the property at the community and was converted from grass to desert landscaping, which is more native here, requires less water. You can also see that that landscape on top, the grass, it sort of has a slope to it that leads directly to a roadway. And so if you're irrigating during the summer days, you're having to overseed it, putting a ton of water on it, drinking water, most of it's either blown away, evaporating, or going into that street and running off into the gutter. And so I see that as something that can be improved upon. And if we look at the left or the right hand example, that's at the Palm Springs Airport. Top image shows some grass that's clearly struggling and didn't really see much of a function. People hanging out there or doing anything that's really seen as functional, and so they've decided to convert it. And so now we have a landscape that saves water, and they don't have to deal with the upkeep of it as well, because grass in a desert is hard to manage, hard to keep happy, and requires a lot of water. Okay, next slide. So one of the requirements of not only the legislation, AB 1572, but of this proposed ordinance is the requirement to self-certify. And so a self-certification is an affected water customer submitting information to Desert Water Agency that gives us information, proof, photos, maps, identifying functional turf areas on their property, whether it's a community, commercial property, governmental, it doesn't matter. If you're affected by the ordinance and the legislation, this would be a requirement to Desert Water Agency. And it's really important because this will be what we base our future decisions on if it comes to enforcing, okay? And in order to make sure that we can enforce the ordinance properly, we require that self-certifications be submitted 6 months prior to the non-functional turf irrigation ban compliance date. And so if you'll recall, one of the earlier slides showed the breakouts, January 1st, 2027, government properties, so on and so forth. That would be what customers need to focus on. Whichever category you belong in, you need to make sure that 6 months before that compliance date, you submit a self-certification to the agency, at which point the agency will review it for accuracy, validate that the areas that they've identified as functional are in fact functional. If they're not, we'll either deny it. If they are, we'll approve it. But if we deny it, we'll also make sure that customers have the opportunity to make a case. Because when we've shown up to water walkthroughs and met with customers, there are times where we think something may be non-functional, and they actually prove us otherwise. And that's fine. We want to make sure that we extend that middle ground for a customer or a property to tell us what is functional there. They live there. They know their property. But there is a fine line there in which we need to strike a balance. And so that's what this self-certification process aims to do, is strike a balance, establish a mutual understanding between the agency and the customer. And then that way, when compliance comes around, we are both on the same page in terms of what needs to be followed. And if it's not, what enforcement or repercussions will come after that. And so if a self-certification is not turned in by at least 6 months before their irrigation ban compliance deadline, there will be a penalty that could be placed on that property, on that property's bill or account. And again, this is really important because without these self-certifications, there's no way for us to enforce it. So if we can't enforce this non-functional turf irrigation ban that's directly associated to how much water we use, that affects our urban water use objective, our ability to get that 42% down the way we need to. If we can't enforce this ordinance the way we need to, we're going to have to make sure that we penalize anyone who's not abiding by that requirement. And so what we have done in the past, actually, as an agency, is we've already sent out letters to our customers that would be affected, right? So commercial properties, HOA properties, and we've let them know that the regulations are coming, the ordinance will be coming, and what will be required of them and what impacts it will have on these properties. We've done that because we want to make sure we prepare customers. So the way it would work is January through June, before their compliance date, we would send them additional notifications, whether that's a letter, whether that's a call, email, the information we can gather for them and send them notifications for, we will do that. And that'll be to give them enough time to prepare their self-certification. If by July they have not submitted their self-certification information, they'll face a $125 penalty. That's a monthly penalty. And our hope is not to penalize them, but to remind them, like, hey, this is needed, it's required. If by August they still have not submitted that self-certification, it's a $250 penalty. September and beyond, it's a $500 penalty per month for not certifying. Okay. So that's going to really be on the front end of things. Once affected water customers have self-certified, then we can move on. They understand what they cannot irrigate, and it will be up to them to make sure they're in compliance. And that would be the basis for enforcement with AB 1572 and our ordinance. There will be a dispute and appeals process. So if, let's say, a customer receives a penalty that they disagree with or that they think is incorrect, they are more than welcome to dispute and appeal that process and go through those steps. If they want to dispute a decision on a functional or a non-functional turf area for their self-certification, they're welcome to do that as well. And so the dispute process would go to agency staff first. If they are then not satisfied with that response or that decision, they can elevate that to an appeal, at which point it would come to the board, Desert Water Agency Board. So enforcing these non-functional turf areas could look, can take different shapes and forms. It could either be agency staff out and about that we notice a violation, and then that way we can either report it ourselves, or if it comes to our attention and we're able to validate that information, that could then lead to us identifying that as a violation of the irrigation ban. Okay, so next slide. So once we've established the self-certification that lets us know the functional and non-functional turf areas for a given property, if once the irrigation ban deadlines are in effect after that, a violation occurs, that could lead to a penalty. And these penalties are for the irrigation ban. So violating the irrigation ban as required by the ordinance. Excuse me. And so the penalty schedule below is what, on item B, is what shows the structure of the penalties. First one being, if a violation is validated and confirmed, a written notice will be sent to that property or water customer, allowing them 30 days to correct the situation. And many of you may be thinking, well, why 30 days? They can just, shut off the water. Well, there are situations where it would warrant time, 30 days to switch out a valve, to switch out a grass area, or make any adjustments as needed. So for a first violation, we wanted to make sure we extended enough time for customers to correct any violations. And so there would be no penalty there. If a second violation is noticed, $125 would be the penalty for that violation. Or if a first violation was not corrected within those 30 days, that's when a $125 penalty could also be applied. Okay, so that we want to see that first violation be corrected. So a third violation, if a third violation is noticed, 15 calendar days after the second, that would be a $250 penalty. A fourth violation would be a $500 penalty if it's noticed 5 calendar days after the third violation. And so what you're noticing here is we're allowing time after an initial violation and penalty for a customer to correct before any new penalties or new violations could affect them. And so then it goes to the fifth violation, which is $1,000 for a fifth violation if it's not corrected 5 days after the fourth violation. Sixth violation, $2,000 if it's verified and if it happens 5 days after a fifth violation notice. Beyond sixth violation, it would stay at $2,000 per verified violation. And if it seems like these are, I guess you could say, scary amounts, it's because the agency also faces scary penalties with the urban water use objective. We face a potential of up to $10,000 per day for not meeting our objective. And so we have to do our best as an agency to guide our customers, and that's what this ordinance is hoping to do. It's not hoping to penalize our customers. The contrary, it's intended to help guide customers on how to comply. And if they have any questions, we always encourage them to reach out to us. We do consider good faith effort if we notice that a customer is making a true effort towards compliance, or if they have years of being a part of programs or converting grass. Those are things that we want to make sure that we acknowledge. And so that would be the breakdown of what a violation and penalty would look like under the ordinance for the irrigation ban for non-functional turf using potable water. And the next slide just opens it up for questions. I'm more than happy to answer any.
Thank you very much. Director Grasha, we'll start with you with questions.
I asked the question once during one of our committee meetings about if somebody could give me a ballpark figure on the cost per square foot to convert from turf to desert landscaping. And the number I got at the time when we were discussing that, it was asked to get an idea of how effective our rebate would be. I believe it was, what, $2 or $3, which was what we were chipping in. And the city at $1 or $2, I forget the numbers, but. So the Palm Springs Post ran a story a couple of days ago, a couple of weeks now maybe, about a strip of non-functional turf in my division that is the professional opinion was it would cost about $235,000 to convert that little sliver of grass to non-functional turf, to desert landscaping. So doing a mathematical calculation based on Google Maps at about 25,000 square feet. So estimating $10 a square foot to do that, or thereabouts. I slid over to the condominium complex exactly right next to that, and using those figures and counting the rooftops on the amount of grass in that particular condominium association, it appears to be a special assessment coming to each of those units at somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000 to $35,000 to each unit. Those condominiums, that's 10% of the value, actually more, about $300,000 condos. It's onerous. It's disgusting, really, that they're putting all of that pressure to reduce water on that group of people while exempting the rich people. The people that own homes that are solid could probably afford to convert their yards, who are probably the ones using most of the water when you consider that it's about 60% of our housing stock is single-family residential. They're not even part of this discussion. And we haven't yet talked about how we're going to protect those people. We have over 6,000 people in this community that live on $1,400 Social Security or less, $1,400 a month. And I don't know where those people are or how they're pulling it off, but when you stick an assessment like this at them, that is specifically to make somebody in Sacramento feel good, like we did something, while not causing rift within our donor base, to me it's the worst kind of government that I believe I've ever seen. And so the idea that we're going to pass this ordinance without giving some deference to those people that are going to have to pay for this, they're going to be stuck with it. I'm not good with it. Now, we've had discussions about how we're going to maybe be able to manipulate potentially some relief through the tiered rate program that maybe, and in my view, we got to nail that down before we let the dogs out on this. And it's with a recent San Diego case was on the first, what was it, July 28th? Another case got overturned, another tiered rate case. I read that case, couldn't make heads or tails of what they were saying, except that they can't do what they were trying to do. And I get that we are, gung-ho about reducing water use, but if everybody's got to reduce the same or everybody gets the same relief, if the rich guy that doesn't have to make a reduction can't contribute, and I don't know if they can, and we haven't really asked that question, but we have to. We have to be sure that nobody's going to be sent to live in their car in the front of 7-Eleven and eat off the dashboard like we're seeing all over the place because of rules and laws like this throughout this state of California. And we're heading there again with this policy, without those answers, without knowing whether we can put some of those expenses, the cost of service is also the cost of protecting people's right to live safely and pursue happiness in their own home. And when you lay a big assessment on people that can't pay it over some feel-good legislation that we're passing right now, to me, it's not, I can't vote for it. But I could, if I could hear somebody say, yeah, we can provide a safety net for those people, or we can kick in enough money to make it so that maybe they can afford to stay in their homes. If they're, those people are out there, believe me. There are people living in those $300,000 condominiums that are barely hanging on. And this is enough to put them out on the street. Without some kind of explanation of how, did the San Diego case overturn anything that we're going to try and do here? Maybe. We've been kind of hinting around and not really laying it out there because of, I don't quite know what the worry is. I guess it's because we're not quite sure what the law is. And with this case in San Diego the other day, maybe that's been clarified a little bit, but I haven't heard it. I can't see it in there. I don't see direct instructions on how to pull this off to make sure that we get the water reductions that we need and also protect people and their right to have a house. So somebody's got to figure that out and explain it to me before I vote for this. Thanks.
Thank you. Director McKenna.
Thank you very much for the report. I take the point, that this sort of change can cause hardship. But 10 years from now, when the price of water is triple what it is today, there will be even more hardship. I would like to see this happen faster. My breath was taken away, actually, by how fast these penalties accelerate in just 5 days from $1,000 to $2,000. That may be a bit draconian, but hopefully nobody will have to pay them because they'll deal with this situation. I see water getting wasted every day. It bugs me that, excuse me, that we have to wait until 2027, 2029, 2031 before we stop it happening. I think City Hall wastes probably $5,000 a month on water, on grass that wasn't there when they built City Hall. The airport, honestly, we should send someone to the airport at 5 a.m., drive around it, and start citing them for the water that sprays on vehicles, including mine recently, from sprinklers that just spray everywhere. The ornamental grass at the southeast corner of the airport is watered at least twice a day, and the water runs across the sidewalk. The northwest corner, same thing. It's watered middle of the afternoon, water runs across the sidewalk. The same thing happens at the hospital, the same thing happens at City Hall. And what do they have in common? They're public properties. It's our money they're wasting. And I think that should be stopped. So having, let me get off my soapbox, I suppose. This is a necessary change to the way of life of the people who live in this valley. And I understand, I think condominiums you're talking about are Mission Lakes.
The one I'm talking about is it's at San Rafael and Sunrise, I think.
Oh, no, it's a different one. And yeah, there are low-income communities and there are low-income properties, HOAs. Some people are hanging on. They will have to deal with it this way, or they'll have to deal with it that way. But water is not going to be any more affordable, in the years going forward. It will be much less affordable, especially if we come out of the Colorado River settlement with, much less water than we had before. This is a nettle that must be grasped sooner or later. My view is we grasp it sooner, and my view is we pass this ordinance.
Thank you.
So sorry, if,
Yes.
just to address a point that you made about the ramping up of the fine structure, I did just want to have Ernie or Clark explain that a little bit more, if that's that's okay with the board, just to, because it's not necessarily 5 days and then you get another fine, 3 days and you get another fine. There is a little bit of a process to that. And so, I don't know, Ernie. or-
Absolutely. Thank you. So great point. So it's not going to just, penalties do not automatically trigger because 5 days have gone by. It would require a new violation to be confirmed, validated by agency staff in order for that new violation to be confirmed and new penalty to take effect. Again, our goal is not, it's not to focus on trying to penalize customers, but encouraging them to get on board with the requirements of the ordinance and make plans to comply. One thing I want to mention to Director Grasha's point is I completely hear your concerns and your frustrations. And I think from your perspective, I respect them because you are in a sense in between the agency and you're also representing the community. And that's what you were voted in to do. And I think that's valuable and admirable. And that's exactly why we've incorporated one feature into the ordinance that's called the agency discretionary compliance consideration. And so for any customers, affected water customers that would be required to comply with the ordinance, they could submit a economic hardship request to the Desert Water Agency Board, at which point it would come to you for review and approval. Because we want to make sure that we are extending an olive branch, we understand that these changes, regulation, penalties are moving fast, and we want to allow our water customers the time and space to accommodate and make those changes.
Thank you for that clarification, because that was going to be a point I was going to bring up. Now I don't have to do that. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer.
One of my questions is, so our turf rebate program, will that go away for the certain customers that are affected by this at the deadline, like city governments? I don't even know if they've ever applied, but, and then like the HOAs and those communities, once they have to be in compliance, will they not be eligible to get turf rebate money in order to do their projects?
Thank you, Director Bloomer. So the non-functional turf or any of our, the grass removal or any of our ordinances are approved on an annual basis. So there's no direct clause that requires that our incentive would be changed by this ordinance or the legislation. That would be an agency and board decision.
Okay. And then, yeah, I just think it's important to get the ordinance approved so our customers have an actual ordinance and how things are going to happen, so they can look at that and start preparing for the HOAs and everything like that. They can start preparing, collecting money. Maybe they increase their HOA fee by a certain dollar amount rather than, you know, a huge assessment, and, you know, start really looking at what's available for the turf buyback funds and get ahead of the game while it's, the getting's good, essentially. So, yep, so I'm in favor of getting the ordinance in place sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
Yes, thank you, staff. Incredibly thorough presentation, well thought out. I felt that you are being fair to the customers and also trying to comply with the state and the ordinance that it's, or the pressure on us to help our customers reduce rate. I was trying to find the logic of how people would be thrown out on the street because they're, I don't know where that came from, Director Grasha.
I can explain it if you'd like.
You've had your opportunity.
You know what
You've had your
non-judicial foreclosure
opportunity.
is?
No.
If you don't, you shouldn't be voting here.
Director Grasha, you're out of line. Thank you.
If an HOA or a non-functional turf is if we stop watering it, there's actually money saved. You don't have to convert it to anything. It'll convert back to the desert. That was where my thoughts are. I don't see how anybody is going to go out to, you know, be left homeless because their grass is turned to dirt.
I do echo Director Bloomer's point that we need to get this out there so our customer base can see it, can adjust, figure out what they want to do, how they want to do it, give them time, because time is their friend and ours on this particular thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I would
So,
like to
no,
clarify.
no,
I would
no,
like to
you
clarify
are done.
things.
You're done. Thank you. I have questions.
That's not a wise position
I
to
don't
take
care.
in your
I don't
condition.
really care, sir.
Okay.
I have questions for.
It's on, baby.
Okay. I'm going to remind you of a movie quote later on when we're not here in a boardroom where words can be exchanged that aren't normally said in public meetings.
Would you clarify what you're saying for the
I'm
public?
not going to. So
Are you threatening me?
I'm not.
It
threatening
sounds
at
like a
all.
threat.
No, it's not. Mr. Valenciano, so one of the things that I find in the detail of the ordinance is that for HOAs where turf is, I'm not sure how you defined it, but turf that's assigned to a particular property within an HOA for individual use, that would be treated as a single-family residence. Is that correct?
I believe, yes, President Ortega, so I believe you're referring to exclusive use. So the CCNRs for some HOAs include for certain residents having exclusive use areas. They tend to be like patios, courtyards. Every now and then, they can be turf areas. Those are excluded from the legislation, excluded from the ordinance, would not be affected by either, but they would need to be official. So in the actual CCNRs, not just a verbal agreement, it needs to hold some legal weight. Typically, you see that in the contract of a homeowner.
Okay, but oftentimes those exclusive use areas are still part of the common irrigation. They still might be maintained by the community's maintenance company. There may not be any additional responsibility for the upkeep and maintenance by that individual member of that community that spot might be so-called assigned to. Does that create issues for us?
I see your question, and you're right. So oftentimes those exclusive use areas can still be on the master meter, right? Being irrigated by the HOA as common area. I think the greater concern is not the exclusive areas within HOA or common interest developments. It's the community as a whole because of the master meter situation. Many HOAs, condos, common interest development communities have a master metered as opposed set up instead of a individual metered home. And so what that creates is a disconnect between a customer and their water use because they don't see a bill. They don't get a bill in the mail. And so they typically just crank things up. So at scale, I believe the bigger issue is behavior because of master meters within these sort of communities.
I'm still having trouble with this. It is going to be complicated, and it's going to make your job difficult. So you're going to get a map of what's considered functional turf, and it's going to include front yards, for example, of a particular community where that community has decided that the front yard is the exclusive use of that particular property owner at that spot. Yet it's being irrigated by the HOA, it's being maintained by the HOA. There's no responsibility on that homeowner for any of that other than having it in front of their property. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about how we differentiate that, other than, as you said, perhaps it's in the CCNRs of a particular HOA. I think in most cases you're going to find that it's not. That's sort of a gentleman's agreement, if you want to call it that. But so in that situation, they come to you with that map Are you going to ask to see the CCNRs that's going to address that, for example? And we keep a copy of that potentially in case somebody from the state comes to us later and says, hey, why are you letting them have front lawns?
Correct. The goal would be that if an area on a self-certification was identified as exclusive use, we would require some sort of proof of that. A CCNR verification would be more than adequate. From the many meetings and conversations I've had directly with HOA communities, I've asked members, for example, is this front yard area exclusive use? 99% of the time no, it's not. It's common area. But there are a few out there. I don't believe that it's that many. And so because the CCNRs obviously were signed when the resident took hold of the property or the unit, it would already be in there or not be in there. So that would be a basis for, is it exclusive use as of like today, or has it been for 10 years?
Okay. I still have a few questions, but excuse me.
I think
still
it's
have-
important that we
No, I'm
discuss
sorry.
non-judicial foreclosure so that everybody has the same understanding of what happens.
That's not what we're here to talk about right now.
Well,
I
there's-
still have questions.
Okay.
I do want to clarify something that Vice President Bowman said about the turning off the water and it reverting to dirt. That would be a violation of city ordinance. If we're talking about an HOA or a commercial property, for example, where potentially the property owner or the HOA could be cited by the city for not maintaining landscaping. So I don't think that's not really a solution, at least not in the way you were sort of describing it. I just wanted to clarify that. I also wanted to follow up on the comments that were made by Secretary Treasurer Bloomer about the rebate program. Again, I've never looked at this as those two things being connected in any way. We as a board, again, have the opportunity to continue that program as we see fit. If we decided we wanted to align the reduction or removal of that program for certain customers based on how they hit these targets, then we could do that. If we decided to extend that program, put more money into that program, if we were taking the money that we were getting through fines from some of these customers that are non-compliant, that could go back into the program potentially. So just want to make sure that I don't support necessarily tying those two things together, but I think that's something we can look at later when it becomes appropriate to do so. I understand Director Grosh's concerns about the economic impact that this would have potentially on, for example, members that live in a particular community, homeowners association. I see that regularly. I also know that many of these communities have for years underfunded their reserves for whatever motivation. That's irresponsible as far as I'm concerned.
Turf conversion is not part of
Sir,
that
you
part
are
of
so
the
out of
budget.
line right now. You're so out of
Excuse me, but you're
you are out of
spreading
line.
misinformation, trying to
not.
mislead the public
No.
about your
Thank
full
you.
concerns when
Thank
you
you.
yourself are going to make millions off of
I'm
this.
going to make millions? Wow. Have you ever seen my bank account? So
That's why you're so running so forward with this so hard.
I am.
To put the onus on people, and then you're going to be the one that decides
And
whether
look-
they get to get.
And look,
I
sir,
think-
sir, you are so out of
I
line
don't know
right
how
now.
you don't end up
I'm
in
so
jail
glad that
over
this
this.
meeting's being recorded so that it can be posted on our website and that the meetings reflect.
And that's
our-
exactly why these points need to be made. People need
Thank
to
you.
know
Thank you.
that the president
Thank
of their
you.
board is going to make piles of money
Oh, okay.
forcing people to convert to turf, their
Forcing.
turf.
Actually, this board will make that
And
decision.
you, as chairman of the,
Sir, you are
the
out of line.
committee
Out of line.
that oversees
Out of
it,
line.
is going to
Out of
decide whether
line.
who gets fined
Oh,
or
I get to
not.
use this time. You are out of line.
I'm out of order. I get that. But I'm also
You are out of line.
I am right. I am
I
right.
don't care what you think you
100%
are.
every
I don't
day,
care
no
what you
matter
think
how
you
look
are.
at it.
You are not
benefiting
the
from this
president of this
professionally,
board.
and it's.
I
and
don't
it's-
care
it's-
what you have to
It's beyond
think.
the pale that you're
This board
continuing
will
to
make
sit
that
here
decision,
and
not
try.
you. Not you.
And I
This
dare-
board will make that decision, not
No,
you.
the state
This-
Fair Political Practices Commission
We are going to take a 5-minute recess on the request of Director McKenna. Thank you. Thank you. Excuse me, gentlemen. Thank you. So with that, we are going to end the conversation and we're going to move to opening the public hearing. I ask members of the public who would like to comment on this particular item for the public hearing to make themselves present and to limit their comments to no more than 3 minutes. Seeing none, we will close public comment. And I will be looking for a motion for approval of staff's recommendation to adopt ordinance number 80.
I move to approve the ordinance.
I have a first from Director McKenna.
I'll second.
Thank you. I have a second from Secretary Treasurer Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
No.
Director McKenna,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
Thank you. Now we go back to action items. Number 7A, request approval to add Riverside County Local Agency Formation Commission, otherwise known as LAFCO, to external meetings lists. General Manager signs.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. As you recall, at the last board meeting on January 15th, January, I'm trying to go back a few months. On July 15th, at the agency board meeting, there was a discussion regarding the LAFCO, the Riverside County Local Agency Formation Commission, and the recent meeting of June 26th and an agenda item that was on that, during that meeting on June 26th. And during our staff report at the last board meeting, agency staff reported that DWA agency staff will continue to monitor LAFCO and its agendas and stay engaged with the Special Districts Association of Riverside County in regards to any future items that may come up on that agenda. And during that discussion item, Director Gracia requested that the board add LAFCO meetings to the external meetings list. And if that is desired to add LAFCO meetings to that list for compensation, consideration should also be given as to which board member be assigned and to LAFCO meetings as well as their alternate. LAFCO meetings, just for your information, are typically held at 8:30 a.m. on the fourth Thursday of every month. They are live streamed as well as held at the Riverside County Administrative Center, and the commission goes dark the month of August. So we're looking at about 10 to 11 meetings per year. There is no current budget. There's no fiscal impact as we already have meetings budgeted for board directors and their compensation. And staff recommends that the board of directors consider adding these meetings to the external meetings list. And consideration should also be made about assigning which directors will be able to attend and their alternate. And with that, I will answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Director Gracia.
I hope that the board will approve this request over a period of time, more than months, probably over a period of a year or two. It will become clear and apparent to this board why having the knowledge of what's going on at that at LAFCO is important to this board, and the knowledge gained from it will be very important to the people we represent. So I ask that you approve the request.
Thank you. Director McKenna.
I have no objection to this idea.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer.
I'm in favor of adding it to the list.
Okay. Vice President Bowman.
I might be the only one saying I don't realize the significance. We have staff involved. I don't know of any water district right now that has directors that attend this meeting. And
Every item on the agenda last
Please,
month
sir,
was water
you are
district
not, you
related.
are
I'm
out of
speaking
order.
right now, Dr.
Out
Gray.
of order.
It's a discussion. If we're not going to have a
No,
discussion, then we
you've
might as
already
well
had your
just let you
opportunity.
run the
Thank
place
you.
and we won't show up.
That would be great. I think the granularity of our board, the staff, this is a staff level. I trust our staff to keep us involved, informed. I think it's easy to generate in one's mind theories and ideas that are not borne out in reality. So I don't see the need personally. I may be the only one.
You're not. I do have a question for Director Yort. It's my understanding that this is something that your team generally follows and participates in these meetings.
Yes, I have been watching them myself and have added them to my calendar and list of items that I'll be working on and keeping a close eye on.
And one of your responsibilities and your team's responsibilities is government affairs and legislation. So I feel, as you do, Vice President Bowman, I feel very confident that our staff is capable of handling and keeping us informed as a board if we needed to be informed, if they felt that we needed to be informed. I'm not in favor of adding this to the list. So with that, I will look for a motion.
I move we add it to the list.
I have a motion from Director Gracia. I'll look for a second.
I'll second.
All right. I have a second from Secretary Treasurer Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director McKenna,
No.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
No.
and President Ortega.
Nay.
Motion denied.
Right. 7B, request adoption of resolution number 1361, establishing tax rate for fiscal year 2025-2026. Finance Director Slough, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. Today, I bring forth to you Resolution 1361, establishing the tax rate for fiscal year 25-26. This resolution certifies to the Riverside County Board of Supervisors the Desert Water Agency ad valorem tax rate for the 2025-2026 fiscal year. These taxes are collected to meet our financial contractual obligations with the State Water Project. So you'll hear me throughout the staff report refer to these as the State Water Project tax. So to determine the necessary amount raised by ad valorem taxes, we analyze and compare the agency's current year and projected revenue from the agency's replenishment assessment charge, referred to as the RAC, that's available to cover State Water Project charges, along with current and projected increases in property value assessments and its impact on the ad valorem tax revenues. And then we also factor in the current year State Water Project invoices, as well as projected costs out into the future, and then also maintaining our State Water Project reserve balances. So taking all of these factors into consideration, along with tax rate stability, the agency recommends a tax rate necessary to fund current expenditures, as well as providing adequate ending reserve balances for long-term revenue requirements. So the agency utilizes revenues generated by the RAC charge and the State Water Project tax to meet its financial contractual obligations for imported water from the State Water Project. The RAC portion is intended to cover the charges attributable to the delivery of State Water Project water, and the State Water Project tax is intended to cover charges related to the availability of the imported water source. So the tax is to get the water here, and the RAC is then to serve it to our customers. The agency's Enabling Act only allows the RAC to include recovery of state water projects attributable to the delivery. It does not allow the RAC to be used to attribute to the availability of state water project. It would be infeasible to utilize the agency's retail water rate to pay for all of the state water project expenditures in the next upcoming year. And this is for a couple of reasons. A significant portion of state water project is used by water purveyors other than our agency for the delivery to their retail customers. And then also the agency's retail rates and charges for the upcoming fiscal year have been calculated in accordance with California Constitution Article 13D. The agency also pays the RAC assessed on the production of water from areas benefiting from the recharge of the imported water. Therefore, the agency's retail water rate includes a proportionate share of the RAC-related expenditures as compared to other groundwater producers within the agency's boundaries. If the agency were to include all state water projects for the upcoming year into our rate calculation for the upcoming year, our rate would have to increase from the current consumptive rate of $2.75, that will be effective January 1st of 2026, to $4.11. And so this would be an increase of about 50%. So through the adoption of this resolution, the Desert Water Agency Board of Directors would fix the tax rate at 6 cents per $100 of assessed valuation, as was included in the 25-26 general fund budget. And this is a reduction of 1 cent per $100 assessed value that we were charging last fiscal year. Included with the staff report, we have a summary of assessed valuations and the resulting tax rates for the current fiscal year. And it provides then a breakdown of the sources of the estimated property tax revenue. So if the resolution is adopted today, staff will submit a copy to the County Board of Supervisors to be included in their upcoming agenda for adoption. And this resolution would direct the County Board of Supervisors to levy the 6 cents per $100 valuation for the 25-26 fiscal year on all taxable property within the agency. Fiscal impact of this resolution, we're once again fixing the tax rate at 6 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. That would provide $36,896,000 in revenues, which were included in the general fund budget for the 25-26 fiscal year. Legal counsel has reviewed this resolution, and so staff would recommend that the board adopt Resolution 1361, establishing the tax rate for the 25-26 fiscal year at 6 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. Any questions?
Thank you. Director Grasha, do you have any questions for our finance director?
Have you figured into this calculation the new estimate been released by the state, the sites project, the increase in cost of that project in the many billions of dollars over what it was a year ago when we started talking about reducing this by a penny. I think it's $2.5 billion more today than it was when we started talking about this reduction. At Coachella Valley Water District, they're at 11 cents, and they stayed at 11 cents because of that concern. I don't want to get in trouble, a year from now or 5 years from now and say, well, maybe we cut it too short. I know there have been times in this district's history when the board has adjusted these calculations, and at one time it was 72 cents per $100 and was reduced to, I think at that point the staff recommendation was to go to 68 cents, and they went to 70 or 71 cents. So that's my question. How do we know we're going to be able to meet these obligations comfortably and without stress on our ratepayers at any one time.
So yeah, that is our goal. We definitely want to smooth the tax rate so that way we're not going up and down and kind of being reactive, to short-term issues. And so we do factor those costs in, but I am going to ask General Manager Sines to kind of speak to when those new charges have come through. And
Yes, so when we do the tax rate projections, it's based, of course, off of the best available information that we have at the point of the time that we make the calculation. The release of that information was done a little bit later, as well as we do not know specifically how it is going to impact Desert Water Agency. However, we do have a long on-ramp before those would actually take effect. So we have construction coming up, and there's financing options to capitalize the interest or to pay interest only. Those decisions have not been made yet, but those capital costs are not going to hit in the very near future. And so we will have a long on-ramp before we have to start making payments that the tax would potentially be able to provide the revenue in order to make those payments. So we are not yet at that point. We do have a long on-ramp to get there to be able to incorporate those increased costs. The cost projection at this point in time does include the original ones, but as of right now, the increase is not included, but we do have a long on-ramp to get there. And so this next go-around that we project our tax rate and, what does the next 30 years look like for us? We will be able to fold those in as we have more detailed information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Director McKenna?
Always happy to see some, excuse me, I'm always happy to see some good news on the tax front. I mentioned that this was coming to Desert Hot Springs City Council a few weeks ago, and I got a round of applause from the audience, so I can hear it now. I'm indebted to Director Gracia for showing me a piece of history of this agency. When this agency was formed, that tax rate was 72 cents or more. And there was a debate, believe it or not, over whether it could be reduced to 68. So it's terrific progress to see that it's going to be 6 next year. Thanks.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer?
No
Sorry.
questions.
Vice President Bowman?
This is based on the value of the homes, of real estate. So if the market goes down, if the housing prices drop, have we thought about how that would impact this 1 penny down?
So we've taken a look. We've had previous circumstances over the years here at the agency where we have seen a decrease in we've had recessions. In order for it to be recognized as a decrease in the value of the home has to change hands. So there is a cap of how much an assessed valuation can increase, is capped at 2% per year when there hasn't been a change in ownership, and then it is reevaluated at that change of ownership. So there needs to be a turnover of that home. It does not decrease, but it is limited to 2% per year. So there's a bit of protection in that. However, that does not protect us against people defaulting on their taxes. And when we see that potential on the horizon, that we feel that there is that risk, we have built it into our projections for that year. So most recently, during COVID, we did that because we knew what had happened during the previous recession, and we knew what type of delinquency rates we experienced at that point in time, so we built that in. Now, thankfully, we did not realize that, and that did provide us the opportunity in future years to be able to reduce because we still collected on that, and so we had that in a reserve. So that did provide the opportunity for us to reduce in future years.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any questions, but I do want to make sure that we honor your comments to the Desert Hot Springs City Council. Wouldn't want to put you and Director McKenna in an embarrassing situation. No, I'm joking, really. But I At this point, unless there's any further discussion, Director Gracia?
I move item 7B for approval.
All right.
I'll second.
All right. I have a first from Director Gracia, a second from Secretary Treasurer Bloomer. May we have the roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director McKenna,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. We move on to discussion items. This is for 8A, which is the Accelerated Potable Water Pipeline Replacement Program update from Assistant General Manager Tate. Good morning.
Thank you, President Ortega and members of the board. I'm here to provide an update on the Accelerated Potable Water Replacement Program. Before I start the presentation, I'd like to provide a background on the program. Beginning in 2014, the agency experienced significant leaks within the agency's potable water system, requiring a significant amount of labor hours to repair. Upon investigation, it was determined that 94% of the leaks occurred on bare, unlined steel pipelines over 55 years old. At the October 20th, 2015 board meeting, staff provided a presentation on the state of the agency's pipeline, current pipeline replacement program, and the recommendation to accelerate the agency's pipeline replacement program. The accelerated program targeted pipelines 55 years and older, consisting primarily of bare, unlined steel pipelines. Staff recommendation at the time was to increase the agency's replacement program from 1 mile per year to 2.75 miles per year. At that rate, it would take approximately 32 years to replace all 87 miles of bare, unlined steel pipeline from the agency's system. In the 2016-2017 fiscal year budget, the agency began to increase the pipeline replacement program budget to fund the program, marking the beginning of the implementation phase of the agency's accelerated pipeline replacement program. And so I'll move on to the presentation now. So this, as I mentioned, accelerated potable water pipeline replacement program update for the last 10 years. Presentation overview. So I'll go over the pipeline asset inventory, pipeline statistics, and leak analysis, program summary, and then we'll answer any questions. Start with pipeline asset inventory. So the first one I'd like to focus on is ductile iron pipe. Has a life expectancy of 100+ years. Ductile iron pipe is the material of choice for the past 35 years, as can be seen by the mileages. They're almost 35 miles in the last 15 years, and 52 in the 10 years prior to that, and 29 in the 10 years prior to that. Ductile iron pipe is almost exclusively specified on all projects now, with certain exceptions dictated by construction constraints. Steel pipes, a lot more you can dictate exactly what you get with steel pipe. So in certain circumstances, like shallow pipe, you might need steel pipe because you can order it thicker. On to steel pipe. CMLC, so that's a concrete mortar lined. So that's the interiors. It has a concrete mortar lining, and the exterior has a concrete mortar coating. As you see, that pipe there has a concrete lining and coating, which is good. That CMLC is a good material, but it does require more labor hours to install than ductile iron pipe. Each joint has to be welded, and the good thing about it is it does come in longer lengths, so it's less joints that have to be welded, but still it's a lot of labor required to weld it. At small sizes, say 4 to 18 inches, the welding of the joint interior is very difficult. The welding of the joint is very challenging, but lining of the interior joint is very difficult because you can't get in there to coat the joint. So, pipe's 20 feet long. You can't reach in there to coat it, so you have to use um, a bag that has a coating on it, and you have to pull it through and kind of hope that it falls in the joint. It's very challenging to do that. So it's very hard to properly seal the joints. At larger sizes, 24 inches and up, the joints can be coated by crawling the pipe. So you just send a laborer in there to crawl inside the pipe, and then they would coat the joints. And then after they've done that, then you send an inspector in there, and they would go make sure it's been done properly. You see the benefit of the ductile iron pipe. It's like Legos. It just gets stuck together and maybe bolted in some circumstances. There's no coating of the joints. So you see the CMLC fell out of favor approximately the same time ductile iron came into favor, just because it's so easy to install. Next pipe I'd like to focus on is asbestos cement, or AC pipe as we call that. That pipe one was very popular in the 70s and the 80s, and was last installed in 1993 due to federal regulations, which eliminated the uses of asbestos. The pipe itself is very stable. It's made of an inert material. It's not susceptible to rust, though the material is very brittle and will break very easily. Anytime it is interacted with a pipe crossing under it, crossing near it, it'll snap, and it's something we become very cautious of in dealing with. And it's not self-restrained like some of the other pipes. So at every angle or end point, you have to put a large thrust block, a large concrete blob of concrete. So it's just a lot more work to put it in. And anytime we attach to it, we either have to put a thrust block in there. It's just very, it has some challenges, but it does last forever, which is great if you don't touch it. Another challenge with this pipe is it came in shorter lengths, 13 to 10 feet, whereas ductile is 18 or 20 feet, and steel is 20-foot lengths. So these shorter lengths make it more susceptible to joint failure, a lot more joints, a lot more potential for the joints to fail, the rubber to rot out and become an issue. And we still have some of this material. We use it as a replacement. If we have an AC main and it breaks, we have some left over that we can install. Using proper protective equipment and methods and techniques to ensure that no one is in danger from the asbestos. The final pipeline I'd like to focus on is the unlined steel. That's the sort of the topic of the day. And this material was installed quite a bit in the 50s and 60s. Maybe they weren't aware of the rusting, or it was inexpensive or readily available after the war. But there's a significant amount. If you look, 53 miles were installed, in the 40s and the 50s. We have a total left of it of 65 miles. One note is, the older you get, there's a little more uncertainty with the materials that we have in our system. If we installed the pipe 5-10 years ago, we have a very good asset inventory of what was installed. Something that came about with the GIS program is we found a lot of pipe that wasn't in our inventory. So we found approximately 1.3 miles of smaller pipe, which would be copper, galvanized, or cast iron. It's just unknown or other material that we found. There's some mains. Collie Rolfe came up a couple of weeks ago that we're replacing. That's 2-inch. Not that was unknown, but that's a kind of an example of a smaller pipe that we actually went through and cleaned up before we had an access database. It was just a database. It wasn't geographically located. Once we put it into GIS, we started going, hey, there's this section that's missing. And we've kind of thrown it into the mix. Then we've also found unknown materials. So we found sections of pipe that were not in the database and not known. And we actually found 10.3 miles of this pipe. But due to the age of the circumstances, one pipe on either side is from the 40s, the other pipe on the other side is from the 40s. We assume it's an older pipe. And so we've included that in the unlined steel asset inventory, just due to the circumstances of where the pipe was installed. So in these, the next slides, you might see this, the links increase. We didn't go out and install unlined pipe, we found it. Next slide. So here's a sort of a summary of what I've discussed there. You can see CMLC pipe has been installed since the 20s. And we still will install it on certain occasions. AC pipe kind of had its heyday in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And ductile iron's mostly exclusively used now. But we're focusing on the pipeline that's 55 years and older. That's given us the most problems. And so when we have our capital improvement program, we're looking for these pipes, and we've grouped them by neighborhoods to try to limit the impact on customers, but mostly focusing on 55-year and older. Next slide. So this is the pipeline statistics and leak analysis. Okay. So the pie chart on the left is, as of 2015, that was the mix of pipe in the system. So it was 19% ductile iron, which is 74 miles, 34% CMLC, which is 133 miles, and then it was 27% asbestos, which is 106 miles, and then 78 miles of unlined steel. And then as of now, we currently have 29% ductile, so we've gone up quite a bit in ductile because of the exclusive use. We have still 29% of CMLC. Asbestos cement is now 26%. The other categories, as I mentioned, other materials that we've found. And then now we're down to 13% unlined steel, which represents 53 miles of pipe in the system. On to the next slide. So this is the total leaks by pipe type. So scroll down just a little bit more. Okay. So between 2005 and 2015, there are a total of 2,510 leaks. 94% of those leaks were on unlined steel pipe, and then very small percentages of the other pipe sizes, or types, I mean. If you look at 2015 to 2025, there have been 4,563 leaks in this time period, and 96% of the leaks occurred on the unlined steel. So we've done a pretty good job through the GIS of identifying where the unlined steel is, and we know where the leaks are coming from. So in that 4,500, approximately 4,500 leaks, 4,300 of them are unlined steel. The main takeaway from this is that the vast majority of the leaks occur on unlined steel pipe, and we, through our GIS program, we've done a good job of identifying where that's at. Next slide. So this is a percentage. Compares the current state of the system. So currently we have 413 miles of pipe. We're putting in a large percentage of ductile iron. We have 13% of unlined steel, which represents 53 miles of pipe. But that unlined steel represents 96% of our leaks. And so it's the issue that we've been focusing on. Okay, next slide. the leak trend. So with the accelerated pipeline replacement, we've lowered the rate of leaks since 2021. We've done a pretty good job of replacing the pipeline. COVID slowed us down a little bit. It presented some challenges, but we worked through it during that time, and we've been trying to keep up our pace. We expect as we continue to focus on online steel pipe that we'll see the rate of leaks to decline. This is similar to the polyethylene pipe presentation we had a little while ago. We're bending the curve down, but this is just going to take a lot longer because there is a lot more of it. It's much more challenging to replace. It's much more cost intensive. So if this we ran some numbers. If the accelerated pipeline program were not initiated, we would, using extrapolation, we would be looking at maybe 1,400 to 1,600 leaks per year right now. We use the polynomial extrapolation of the prior years and looked at how the curve was going up. So it's like anything in life. If you make the change, it's hard to tell where you would have been, but we're in a better spot. This is just to show that we are making progress. On to the next slide. Program summary. All right, since 2015, the agency has replaced approximately 21.4 miles of bare unlined steel at a cost of $26 million. 13% of the agency's potable pipeline are bare unlined steel, which is 65.6 miles. Bare unlined steel's 96% of our leaks, and 4,300 leaks in the last few years, many years. The leaks are we're making headway on it, but it's just slow and it's expensive. Inflation, COVID kind of slowed us down. Inflation's eating into our ability to replace pipeline for the budget, but we're sticking with it. One thing to note is sometimes you might see a program or one of our projects come through where not all the pipe is unlined steel. That's because of our efforts to work with the city. We work with the city for their pipeline replacement project. It's also, we're making plans that we're trying to get into a neighborhood, replace all the pipes in the neighborhood. Some of the pipes might not totally be at the point of failure, but for convenience to the neighborhood, we're getting in there. We want to replace the whole neighborhood. We don't want to impact someone and then come back 4 years later and replace their pipe, replace their main when they've had to drive by it for a previous replacement. So we're taking like a neighborhood block approach and trying to work within the city's paving plans. They have Measure J funds. Their projects are, much easier to design, cost a lot less, quicker to install, and so we're trying to keep up with them the best we can. And we're working through it. Future. So we're going to, as I mentioned, continue to focus on replacing the 65.6 miles of bare unlined steel at a replacement rate of 3 miles a year. It'll take approximately 22 years to replace all the unlined steel and a value of approximately $110 million in today's dollars. So, as I mentioned, some projects, sometimes we might replace a project or a pipe that's not unlined steel, but it's due to the neighborhood approach. Let's see, have any questions?
Thank you. Director Gracia, any questions for our Assistant General Manager?
Well, I've brought this up, I guess, at just about every meeting as I look back, and I'm glad to see that you guys are still maintaining a focus on this, and I look forward to 22 years from now, is it, when we can start over again? But I hope that the prices, as things are escalating, it's just you know, we have to ask ourselves, are we going to be able to continue at that rate? And I know that through your budgeting process, you're going to see to it that we do at least stay in the game. I was thinking that there might be places to pull from, along with potentially increases in rates to be able to make sure we keep up with it, maybe even escalate the effort a little bit. And with all the other things you have to do, how many reservoirs are you doing a year? Is it one a year? You've got about 30 reservoirs and you're resurfacing and.
So the coatings last about 20 years. And so we evaluate all the reservoirs. If they come close to that number, we start evaluating them. Every 3 years, the reservoirs are internally inspected by a diver. So we get a diver in there and we'll get a report of the health of the coating on the interior. The exterior is easier to see, just walk up and look at it. So we're keeping track of that. In the budget this year, we included the budget for doing reservoir exteriors. We have a few reservoirs that we're going to recoat. So like I said, that's some years depending on the schedule, we might not recoat any. It's just, depending on what the reservoir needs.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're going to be able to keep up with things as best you can and keep a forward-looking eye on the whole thing. The other day, our last meeting, I brought up, the idea of doubling down, or at least reviewing our efforts in the area of safety. It occurred to me while I was sitting there, and I looked at all the new faces. We're all new here, just about. Whether we want to admit it or not. And it's all on us now to make sure that we keep up the excellent work that's been done here over the generations, and that's what I want to be certain of. And no matter how hard it is sometimes to educate people, children sometimes don't want to pay attention, and you have to get their attention. And so I think things are looking very good for our future, and I'm very happy to be able to say that. So thank you.
Thank you. Director McKenna.
Well, I have questions. Years ago, I was on a project where I watched cement lining being added to a pipe, and that was much bigger than the stuff we have. But have you looked at the possibilities of relining of this older pipe, especially the bigger diameter stuff, with either cement or some polymer? Have you looked at that?
We haven't, but the pipe is failing because of leaks.
Right.
And our solution has been to replace it. And also too, the pipe in that age, the installation methods were not up to what we would do now. It's all very shallow pipe. That's been one of the challenges that's come about with the city paving project, is the pipe in that time period was installed at maybe 2 feet of depth.
Okay.
Some of the pipe is shallower. So when the city is coming through with their full depth paving replacement program, they're actually rumbling the pipe so bad that it is creating leaks. And this is a huge problem that we've run into. We've had, like I said, we've been working with the city, and we have sections that they're replacing the pavement. We haven't had any leaks on that section. And then they come through, and then all of a sudden the pipe just gets rumbled and jarred, and we've had to work with them to adjust the methods that they use to lay down the pavement, where they don't use the vibrating roller. They use a heavier roller that doesn't vibrate to compact the asphalt. But so there's other circumstances that would make us not want that pipe anymore.
So this pipe is kind of beyond hope. You're saying. The other point I have is that you're talking about acceleration. You're talking about accelerating from 2 miles a year to 3. And just running the numbers in my head, it was 65 miles of pipe, 3 miles a year. 20 years from now, it would be, no, this has got wrong. Sorry. 22 years from now, it would all be gone. Yeah, I'm just wondering what about 10 years from now? We're halfway through. We still have 30 miles of pipe, but it's 10 years older. Are we not going to be outrun by the leaks? Have you done a simulation on that to see, does the trend go down?
So, well, one, we've added another engineer in last year's budget. So we have another engineer that we're going to be hiring to help with this. So that'll help with that, accelerate the design. It seems the engineering on our end has been the limiting factor. Not at staffing level. So we're adding a staff member, that should help get the pipelines done quicker. We haven't done an analysis on at what point we break through. We're kind of in the, we know we have a path we're following, and we're just trudging our way through it right now.
That's not a hard simulation to do. I'm going to do it as homework. I'll let you know what I find.
If I may add, so the 3 miles per year, while we have said that, that is our current rate, we are not indicating that that will always be our future rate, as Assistant General Manager, Chief Engineer Tate had indicated that, we have already added an additional body in our engineering department. So we will, just by doing that alone, it provides the potential to be able to ramp that up some as well. So it was a judgment call, and we just had to make a determination, like, well, what do we say? Well, how do we calculate how long it will take? Well, based off of current conditions, what we're currently experiencing, our recent experiences, we are able to go ahead at a clip about 3 per year. We are not limiting and saying our goal is to do 3 per year, so there's still work that can be done to escalate that, but we do have other limiting factors such as staff, such as availability of space to put that staff, that also limit that as well. So those are things that we have plans to attack and to be able to make changes in that direction, to provide the opportunity to make changes in that direction. So 3 is what we had said for this, because that's our current experience. Does not mean we cannot accelerate in the future, though.
Yeah, I think, faster is definitely better in this case. And I think we should also be aware that we have a level of government above us that's raising the price of steel by 30%. So none of this helps. Let's keep our eyes on what's going on.
That's Chinese steel. We're buying American steel.
Okay, thank you. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer.
Thank you very much for the update. It's good to see. It actually fits exactly how long I've been on the board. It's 10 years. And at the time when it first came on board, we also did one of the first rate studies and had to increase the fixed rate by a very decent percentage to accomplish this whole program. We had to do a lot of outreach, and there were, as far as, public hearings and things like that, to explain to people that there are fixed capital costs that go into their water rate and why we had to increase it. So, and I think that will be, relevant when we do our next rate study, is how much do we need to allocate towards capital and pipe replacement into that fixed cost on the water rate. And also the city of Palm Springs got their Measure J. I was on the Measure J commission at the time. At the same time, 2013 is when Measure J started. So they ramped up all their street efforts around the same time when we just started to replace the pipes. So I know everyone tried to get on the same program, but there were some things that were unknown. And that's when it really started with the full reconstruction and all the leaks and what it caused. So it was kind of a perfect storm in all that timing. So, but I'm glad to see that we're still moving along and looks good.
Thank you for that perspective. Appreciate it. All right, Vice President Bowman.
Other than the fact that you guys are on it, appreciate all the data and the materials that have shifted over time. What will be next? We'll find out. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm like Director McKenna, faster is better. I guess that will be our job as a board to look for ways to increase that. If there's a way to do that, you've already addressed, it sounds like you're already addressing one bottleneck that you've identified, which is staffing. The next bottleneck will be funding. My question to staff is, where could that additional funding come from if it were not part of the fixed rate?
Yeah, if not a part of the rate, I'm not going to speak to specific
Yeah,
for
okay.
fixed
Thank you.
versus variable. So the potable water rate, you know, if funding were not to come from there, it would have to be from grant funding. That would be an additional source. Those are really the only two that we have available. Grant is funding, of course, is not a given either. We do have an update later on in the general manager's report, kind of on grant fundings and our efforts there. So it is essentially on our rates. So we need to be able to fund that with our potable water rates, because that is what the funds will be used for, is for that system.
So there would not be reserve for monies that we potentially pull into that program?
We do have reserve monies. However, in our operating fund, we do not have as healthy of reserves as we do in our general fund. And we cannot dip into the general fund to be able to pay for that, because that is funds that are collected for a certain purpose and restricted to that. So we would have to stay within the operating fund and would provide the ability to potentially accelerate funding in the short term. However, we need to have our the capacity to be able to do it on the staffing side to be able to do more. So they kind of go hand in hand, as well as it would not be sustainable just to dip into our reserves, because what if we had some other major events that happen, then we wouldn't have our safety net.
And ultimately, that replenishing the reserves would come from the rate anyway, right?
That is correct. The reserves are funded by the rate. So ultimately, yes, you're correct. It does come from rates still, even though we have it set aside.
Okay, thank you. All right. With that, I guess we can move to item 10, which is our Secretary Treasurer's report.
Okay. These are the financial highlights for June of 2025, so the last month of the previous fiscal year. In the operating fund, we received $4,162,993 in water sales revenue receipts, $31,614 in recycled water sales revenue receipts, $465,400 in construction deposits, and that was 2 projects from Riverside County Desert Community College District, which I believe is for the new COD campus in Palm Springs, and 2 projects by the Agua Caliente Band of Cahuilla Indians. Then $275,960 included miscellaneous receipts for urban community drought grant reimbursement from CVWD. We paid $2,315,317 in accounts payable. Year-to-date water sales, total revenue, and expense budget variances will be provided after the 2024-25 annual audit. Operating fund active potable services was $23,736 billed in June, compared to $23,716 billed in May. So there was a net increase of 20 active services. There were 39 water accounts turned off for non-payment in June 2025. Over the past 12 months, an average of 30 accounts per month turned off for non-payment, so that's about 1.5% annual disconnection rate. In the general fund, we received $480,081 in property taxes, $4,008 in replenishment assessments from private pumpers, $234,391 in state water project refunds, and $59,859 in power sales. We paid $1,195,742 in state water project charges. And year-to-date, that's a little over $22 million for state water project payments. Wastewater fund, we received $127,934 in operating fund reimbursements, and we paid $90,539 in accounts payable. There were 2,252 active sewer accounts billed in June, compared to 2,259 billed in May. So decrease of 7 active accounts. And with that, people can ask questions.
All right. Director Gracia, do you have any questions about our treasurer's report?
Thank you. Excellent report. I do have one thought. we're still seeing more revenue than but we budgeted for. This seems like it's a lot more. Am I wrong about that? I'm talking about the water sales income. Do you know?
Yeah, we're about 11% over budget.
And what is that in?
It's mainly consumption, so.
Right, but I
consumption.
mean, how much is that in number? How much money was that? 11% of $4 million?
40 million roughly, so it would probably be about like $6 million.
Okay. So my fingers are crossed that that's a revenue that'll be going toward our pipeline and other things. I don't know how long that can last, but my hope is that that's a little relief to our customers going forward, that because they're using so much water. Thank you.
That has been already built into our projections for when we set our budget for fiscal year 25-26 that we're currently in. So what we do is we take, because yes, we did anticipate that there would be, because of historical last year when we set the budget, we did anticipate that there was going to be continued conservation at the same level that we had experienced the prior couple of years. However, we saw a rebound. And so we did end up essentially billing for more water consumption than what we had anticipated. And when that happens, we take where we're at, project forward to the end of the year, and say that that's our basis point of how much money we have in the bank, and then we start allocating it, whether it be to reserves or whether it be to our operating expenses or capital improvement projects. So yes, that money has already been allocated for things such as capital.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you remember correctly, capital project expenditures in this year's budget were approximately 17 million as compared to 12 million last year.
Excellent. Thank you.
Director McKenna?
No questions, thanks.
Thank you. You don't have any questions for yourself? All right. Vice President Bowman?
None from me either.
Okay, and I have none. So we can move to our general manager's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. So to start off, we want to give a little update on our SGMA efforts. So the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, otherwise known as SGMA, requires groundwater sustainability agencies to submit an annual report to the California Department of Water Resources by April 1st each year following the adoption of their groundwater sustainability plan, or also their alternative plan, of which Desert Water Agency, we are the GSAs in 3 different sub-basins here in our jurisdiction. And we have a GSP for one of them, and then we have an alternative plan for the mission. For the San Gorgonio Pass Basin, we have a GSP, and then we have an alternative plan for the Mission Creek Subbasin and the Indio Subbasin, just as a point of reference. In a letter dated on July 11th, DWA informed the GSA and the San Gorgonio Pass Subbasin that it had completed its review of water year 2024 SGMA annual report that was submitted. And also we received a little bit later than that, a week later, letters informing the GSAs in Indio and the Mission Creek Subbasins that they had completed their review of the 2024 SGMA annual report. And I'm happy to inform the board that DWR determined that the GSPs and the alternative plans continue to be implemented in a manner that is consistent with achieving sustainability goals for each subbasin, and no further action is required at this time.
Excellent.
Okay, moving on to the next item. I wanted to provide a little update on the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes Program, otherwise known as HRL, or otherwise previously when work first began on this program, it was called Voluntary Agreements, but now the name for it is Healthy Rivers and Landscapes. And a little bit of background is that the HRL program, it offers an innovative approach to improve the ecological outcomes for the Bay Delta by leveraging increased flows, new habitat, new science, and collaborative decision-making based off of some outcomes of that science, and while still providing more water supply certainty for communities, farms, as well as businesses throughout California and residents throughout California. all while meeting state regulatory requirements. The program is built around the voluntary agreements among state, federal, and local water agencies, really to shift the water management towards a more collaborative and science-based approach. So, and currently the program as it stands right now, where it's at, it's been in the works for several years, but it exists as a term sheet and a memorandum of understanding that was signed in March of 2022. And but it's not going to be enforceable until the State Water Resources Control Board adopts it into their Bay Delta plan, and that provides an enforceable framework for it. Now, the question might come to mind of like, how does that impact DWA? Like, why provide this? Because we are not located up there, but we are a state water project contractor. Even though we do not receive water directly from the state water project, we do have the exchange agreement with Metropolitan. So these are sorts of agreements. This program, it impacts DWA as it pertains to kind of potential increased flows for us to be able to maintain those flows, for us to be able to export that water and thus exchange with Metropolitan. On July 24th, 2025, the State Water Resources Control Board released a draft update on its Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan, which incorporates the HRL program, which marks a significant advancement in the HRL program itself. The next major milestone of the HRL program will be adoption by the State Water Resources Control Board, and that draft plan right now, that is before the board, the state board, is open for both written and oral comments, and they are holding they have a hearing scheduled for September 8th and 9th of this year, as well as written comments are due by the 10th of September. And public input is being received in order to inform the development of the final draft of the plan, which would then be before the State Water Resources Control Board for consideration in the future. However, no commitment as to a timeline that might take place has been committed to. Now, though the program elements aren't enforceable until the state board approves the plan or includes it in their plan, efforts are still underway by the participants, such as, the state water contractors is involved in that as well, to create a shared governance structure of how this plan will be governed and to guide the future adaptive management under the program, as well as coordinating is also underway under programs that really do benefit, that align with this program to improve the conditions in the Bay Delta. And in the, I think it was July 25th publication of the Aqua News, they have a great write-up of the different projects that are already underway. They're either completed or underway that align with the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes mission. Moving on to the next item, congressional directed spending for fiscal year 26 update. This is the item that I had alluded to earlier. Earlier in the calendar year, Desert Water Agency submitted its emergency power continuity project for community project funding and congressionally directed spending consideration to that has been was up for consideration to its full delegation. As previously reported, only Senator Padilla had selected DWA's project to move forward in the process, but that marked a significant milestone for the agency, as we've never applied for anything like this before. So it was great to be able to make that far. But unfortunately, when the markup was released on the week of July 21st, DWA's program was not selected by the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee for inclusion in the fiscal year 26 appropriations bill. However, as I stated, having Senator Padilla advance our project was a significant step, and of course, it allows us for many lessons learned along the way as we are able to pursue funding of this nature in the future as it seems appropriate. And overall, only 3 California projects were selected for funding under the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund category. And so despite the outcome, DWA, we do plan on continuing to pursue not just federal, but federal and state funding opportunities where it makes sense, whether it's to supplement funding on active capital projects, pipeline replacement programs, for example, or to help advance other currently unfunded programs. Like this program was for the installation of specifically 4 generators at 4 different well locations. Which is only about 20% funded by our budget. So additional funding would help us advance those things. But that, of course, does not mean that we can't advance these sorts of projects at all, whether it be by internal financing or not. So staff anticipates to reapply in the next cycle for congressionally directed funding and may consider this project. We may resubmit this project or our ongoing pipeline improvement efforts or other capital improvement efforts as candidates. So we will be evaluating future opportunities as they arise. However, we did receive a grant, much smaller in nature, but it's still something that helps us here at the agency and our employees. We received, again, from Aqua JPIA, the wellness grant for the 2024 wellness grant application. We did receive notification on July 10th that we were awarded $1,700 for our wellness program, and this was the maximum allowable amount by the program this year, and is the 9th year in a row that we have been awarded a wellness grant by Aqua JPIA. And it provides us the opportunity to provide some health forward focused programs for our employees, whether it be an app. Recently, we've done the Wellable app to have fun competitions for activity levels, of which we can then provide some incentives and awards for, you know, how our employees are doing. Other years, we've done healthy snacks and gym bags and other kind of small gym equipment. So this has provided us a great way to kind of promote wellness with our employees. And we have a blood drive that's coming up on August 6th from 9 to 2. And so this is open to members of the public as well as our staff. And so we have the trailer that comes out here into the parking lot, and we encourage participation by all. Okay, moving on to our system leaks. So it's been 3 weeks since our last board meeting, so it may seem a little bit high, but we are tracking kind of along normal. I think this represents about like 2.5 per day. And so we have, of course, our bare unlined steel pipe with 1 concrete mortar lined pipeline leak during this time frame. So definitely tracking along what we had the information we had provided in our previous presentation. And for those 47 leaks, it took 376.5 total labor hours to address all of them. Okay, so moving on to our next item, I would like to pass this off to Director of Public Affairs and Conservation, Director Lort, to provide us a highlight on some of her meetings and efforts that are underway.
Thank you, General Manager Sines. So as you'll see, it was a very busy month of July. I won't go through each individual meeting. I'll just actually go straight to the projects section, but really kind of the highlights. Including so some items that really pertained to the month of July were the tribal settlement legislative activities. As you see, we had many external and internal meetings related to that. Our ongoing bi-monthly state and federal advocacy meetings, which pertain to strategy and letters. We also released the RFP and closed the RFP in the month of July for a new DWA website. As mentioned, we're looking to update that, but also make it ADA compliant. There are some new ADA regulations coming into place January 2026. So we want to be ready for that. Several meetings on the non-functional turf ordinance, as well as some few external meetings just working on maintaining our relationships. So had met with staff from the county supervisor's office, CEO from the DVBA, as well as, well, now I feel like I need to go back and look at it. Desert Recreation District, their government affairs and PIO individual, and attended the Rancho Mirage Speaker Series lunch where Chairman Milanovic from the Agua Caliente tribe was the keynote. And then moving forward, working with our conservation manager, Clark Elliott, on the AMI customer portal RFP and getting that ready to get released hopefully by the end of August or early September. That concludes my report.
Okay, now moving on to my activities over the last few weeks. Every month, I attend the Delta Conveyance Project monthly meetings, state water contractor meetings, and monthly meetings, as well as state water contractor board meetings up in Sacramento, and the Sites Reservoir Board meeting in Maxwell. And also, we had a quarterly Class 8 meeting, and this is State Water Contractors Class 8. So Southern California, we meet with our local state water contractors because it's definitely the state water project and the interest of different contractors are unique to different regions. So we are broken up into regions. And so Assistant General Manager Tate and I attended that quarterly meeting in San Bernardino with those other participants. And we are currently underway with our exchange agreement extension meetings, negotiating that between DWA Metropolitan and CVWD. So we had a meeting in Riverside where we are in the beginning stages of that negotiation. Of course, we'll be bringing more detail to the board as that progresses. On the 24th, we had our first inaugural Energy Sustainability Ad Hoc Committee meeting held here at DWA. And on the 30th, the Technology Transformation Ad Hoc Committee with the assigned board directors. And that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Director Gracia, do you have any questions on the current report from the general manager?
Just a comment, all is not lost with the congressionally directed funding into Division 1 of $5 million, $3 million to the airport, and another $5 million to relining the Whitewater Channel. Palm Springs benefits more than any other community in Riverside County, and as far as I can tell, the entire state of California. So I think that's at least something that we can be grateful for. $5 million to improve Indian Canyon. The failure of the luggage system at the airport, which I guess ended up costing the manager of the airport his job. So things are not completely lost. I'm appreciative of the work that was done by Congress to see to it that stuff took place. And now that we know that this is something on your radar, maybe we can talk about those things with our representatives. I'm sure you guys have done that.
Yeah.
I chalked up these other successes to probably has nothing to do with it, but I think there's some hope with our relationship with our congressman who is not, that popular publicly, as far as the electorate goes, but he is very powerful in Washington, and I think we might see some improvement on relations in terms of our generators over the next coming years. So I look forward to that.
Thank you. Director McKenna.
I have nothing, thank you.
Thanks. Secretary Treasurer
None for me.
Bowman. All right. And Vice President Bowman.
None from me.
All right. And nothing really from me other than to say that, yes, those items that were requests that we made for appropriations were presented to, I believe, all four of our representatives, right? Because we have 2 members of Congress and 2 senators that represent, that our district falls into, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Yes. Thank you.
Be presented to the full delegation.
Yes, I think I've been participating in a few of those conversations, and I believe Director McKenna and Secretary Treasurer Bloomer have also. So it's not something that we haven't been pursuing. So we look forward to more success sometime down the road. And with that, we can move to item 12, which is our director's reports on meetings and events attended on behalf of the agency. I'm going to ask each board member to report out on compensable meetings or events recently attended on behalf of the agency, and to please announce the date of each of those events. And we'll start with Director Gracia.
Starting on the 15th, our last board meeting, I also attended a Aqua event that day, our meeting that day. On the 17th, the Palm Springs Chamber of Commerce had an event that I attended, and I gotta say, I had an enjoyable time and had a nice, healthy conversation with our one of our council members, Jeffrey Bernstein, who is an excellent member of our city council. That I was glad to finally meet him. He reminded me that I had donated to his campaign, and I didn't remember for the life of me. So he thanked me by buying me a cocktail, and I appreciated that. We had a good time. And then that was on the 17th. On the 23rd, an Aqua event. Let's see if I can. Aqua's vice president and president candidates town hall. So that was a couple of hours long, and I got to say, I'm looking forward to our president that will be coming into office a year from now. How's that? The individual that's taking office now indicated that he's in favor of forcing Californians to refinance their houses to similar in a way similar as old people do to reverse mortgages as a way of funding water projects in the state of California. And I wonder where these people come from and how they get to positions like that. It just boggles the mind. So we also had a meeting on the 24th. Well, let's go back. The 23rd also was a meeting of the San Gorgonio Pass Regional Water Alliance, which is a very helpful meeting to attend. That's all the pass agencies and the work that they're doing and keeping track of all of their projects. Very helpful to a healthy discussion on the effects of the large warehouses that are being built in our district, pointing out how some of the tax revenue works from that. Also had excellent news from the city of Palm Springs, heard my pleas, I think, demanding that we put in a sewer line up there, and they have started construction on that now, and it'll be ready by, I guess, by the time the new warehouses are completed. So at least that worry will be behind us. And then I attended the Coachella Valley Power Alliance meeting as well. I know you don't want to hear about that, but very interesting, informative things happening there. And then on the 31st, the California Zero Emission Vehicle Mandate was discussed. That was a program sponsored by Aqua and organized by the Department of the Environmental Protection Agency. And I must say that they have some interesting ideas on our future, and I don't know how they're going to implement those. with the shaky ground our finances are on as a state and most agencies that are being forced to make those changes. So they're still using the words, but I don't think there's a way forward for their hopes. Anyway, and that brings us to today, so I appreciate your indulgence.
Thank you. Director McKenna.
Since the last meeting, I attended the Palm Springs Chamber of Commerce Mixer at the Tram. Always a great event. I have to say the food is best. Worth visiting if you haven't tried that. That was July 17th. On the 24th, we had a kickoff meeting for the Energy Sustainability Ad Hoc Committee of this board. President Ortega asked me to chair that, and I invited him to join me on that committee. And we started to look at a couple of things. The existing solar field behind us, parts of it 17 years old, so we thought it was low-hanging fruit to look at re-equipping that with more up-to-date panels, more efficient inverters, and see what benefits we could get from that. We also looked at the possibility of taking one of our well sites as a pilot project, installing solar photovoltaics and batteries on that. And that's the direction we're heading with that. I'm really, really happy to be involved in that, that's going forward. I noticed that we spent $779,000 with Edison last month in your report. And these numbers are just staggering. So hopefully we can reduce them in the future. On July 30th, attended the Ad Hoc Committee on Technology with Vice President Bowman. Again, an excellent staff effort on adopting. We're now into the process of adopting GIS systems to get to find the missing pipelines and the strange gaps. Every organization that has a history, has mystery, and we're no exception. So the sooner that all of that is adopted in GIS, we know where everything is and what condition it's in. It can't happen soon enough. That was it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer Bloomer.
I also attended the Palm Springs Chamber of Commerce mixer up at the Tram. That was July 17th. And it was a clear enough day that you could look over and see all the spreading basins. I think half of them were about full. So I answered some questions from some people. Where does that water come from? How does it get there? So that was good. And then on July 23rd, I also logged into the Aqua Candidate forum, which was interesting. And yeah.
I don't know if you got that remark, but I was like, what the hell?
And then I also was here for the executive meeting on July 31st as an alternate. And that is it.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
Well, while some of you were going up to the Tram, Palm Springs, I was in Banff going on their tram to the top of the mountain there, which was spectacular, vacation time. On the 30th, technology transformation, and I echo Director McKenna, the GIS system is changing. It has changed and will continue to change DWA, and it's impressive, needed, and kind of fun if you're a geek, and I kind of think I am that way. And the executive committee on the 31st.
Thank you. So outside of scheduled meetings for this board and for committees, I attended from the 21st to the 23rd, the GMDA conference in Idaho Falls, Idaho. They are dealing with a very kind of, I would say, different situation than what we find ourselves in, a GMDA being, of course, the Groundwater Management District Association, which is made up of many different organizations that participate in groundwater management. I don't think many people realize that in Idaho, especially along the Snake River, which is where Idaho Falls is located, that there is a strong connection between groundwater and the river. That groundwater supplies the river, then goes back into the aquifer, and then comes back up again several times along that stretch of the river from Idaho Falls all the way out to past Twin Falls and on to Boise. And that has been a very problematic situation in the past, because you have senior water rights holders and you have junior water rights holders along that river, and the connection between groundwater management and the surface water has largely been ignored in Idaho until most recently, when last year the state was almost in a position of cutting off or suspending the rights of the ground, or many of the junior water rights holders, which would have meant fallowing 750,000 acres of agriculture in the eastern part of the state. So that is not a great place to be. And we had a presentation from the Lieutenant Governor of Idaho, who had been a longtime member of the state Senate, and he worked to try to mitigate between those senior right water holders who were asking for the call to basically tell the junior rights water holders, right holders to stop pumping water for their farmland. And so they seem to have worked out an agreement now that sort of everyone is trying to live with. That's in its first year. It'll be interesting to see how that evolves, but that has also forced the state to really start to not look at those two types of water sources as treated legally differently, but how they can be managed at the same time under similar state law rather than separate state law. We also were treated to a field trip that included a visit to an injection well site for one of the aquifers, which is basically just taking water off the Snake River into one of the farmers' canals and injecting it deep into the aquifer. That was kind of interesting. And then we also visited the largest barley melting facility in the North America, which is located in Idaho Falls and is owned by Anheuser-Busch. They bring in barley from all around that part of the United States, and they malt it, which I didn't even know what that meant, but it's basically bringing the seed to life so that it will start to create sugars that are then going to be used in the alcohol. It's quite a large process. It's very water intensive. And then we also visited a plant it's for a company called the Idahoan, which one of the early manufacturers of dehydrated potatoes for mashed potatoes and scallop potatoes. Also a very water-intensive operation, believe it or not. And not only, but what was impressive about both of those producers, those processors, was that they were not only working with their farmers that they buy these commodities from to then turn into product, but they were also looking internally within their own processing. Because they also are junior water rights holders. They aren't senior. And so they are sometimes, in that cutoff that would have happened potentially last year, would have been severely impacted in terms of how they could make production. So they're looking at their own processes and how much of that water can be reused in the system, how much of it can be recycled, what leaves the system, where does it go, how is it cleaned so that it can go back into the aquifer and so on. It was very impressive. And then last week for the NWRA conference, Western Water Seminar, which was in Park City, Utah, there was a lot of focus on the water situation in Utah, which is largely, as you can imagine, if you've been to Utah, is not a good one. Very, very uncomfortable, particularly as it relates to the Great Salt Lake and the communities that are located around the Great Salt Lake, which includes the city of Salt Lake. One of our local former water officials from the Coachella Valley Water District, Patrick O'Dowd, who is now the executive director of the Salton Sea Authority, he presented alongside a gentleman who has a similar responsibility for the Great Salt Lake in the state and for the state of Utah. He's a commissioner in charge of that, sort of the overall, how do we preserve what we have with it relates to Great Salt Lake. And that was, there was a much more of a, there was a much broader focus across the western United States at this particular event, not so much focused on Idaho per se, and including a presentation by Craig Miller from the Western Municipal Water District, just on the other side of the mountains from us, and his sort of an initiative he's been leading for a while, which he calls California Water for All, which is a sort of a scaled back version of something that was presented to the legislature, I think a year or two ago, unfortunately vetoed by Governor Newsom at the time, with concerns about the cost and how to fund it. But it's essentially a plan to, or a push to bring real water planning for the future to the state of California, something that really hasn't happened here in a very long time. And this agency is one of the members of that coalition. It was, again, it was really representing to the rest of that Western water users group what's happening in California as it relates to water planning for the future and a real need for that. And that concludes my report. So with that, we can move to item 13, which is director's comments and requests. And we'll start with Director Gracia.
I just want to clarify a misunderstanding on the subject of how this new ordinance that we just passed can affect people that live in our district. When you live in a condominium association, you fall under the Davis-Sterling Act, which spells out certain laws passed by the state legislature that you have to live under, both the HOA and the homeowners. And one of those items that are part of that Davis-Sterling Act is non-judicial foreclosure. It allows a HOA board to enact a special assessment, and if you don't pay the assessment at the demand date, you are subject to non-judicial foreclosure. That means that all the HOA has to do is file with the county a non-judicial foreclosure. It means there's no court hearing. You're out. It's over. No discussion. And that is the concern that I had, that this will invoke that on many of our residents. And without a safety line extended to those people, I'm certain, I have no doubt that that'll happen. What happens is small people get elected to big offices, and then they use those positions to silence dissent. And a homeowner that's not able to pay the special assessment may have a long-going issue with the board, and the board just takes their house. And it's an awesome power that is unfortunately in the hands of too many people that use that power for their own benefit and not the benefit of the public at large. It happens every day. That's why I voted against this. There's nothing in that ordinance that allows us to protect those people from losing their homes. And we're not sure if we're going to be able to use the revenue potentially generated through increased rates on some ratepayers to be able to transfer that to aid those people. So until we know that, in my view, we shouldn't have passed Ordinance 80. But that's it. Thank you for your time and your consideration on that.
Thank you, Director McKenna.
I have none, thanks.
All right, Secretary Treasurer Bloomer,
None for me.
Vice President Bowman.
None from me.
Okay, I have a couple of things. As of yesterday afternoon, some of you may be aware that there has been a fire on the other side of the mountain above Palm Desert that is impacting part of our district. Our boundaries extend into the Pinion area, and the Alpine Village areas of that part of Riverside County. And there are several small water agencies that operate there, very independent of this agency, but that land does fall within our boundaries, and those homeowners do pay taxes to support this agency. This has been a conversation that some of us have had, primarily me and Secretary Treasurer Bloomer, as it relates to that part of our district that used to fall under my division and now falls under her division. I am wondering out loud whether there might be some technical support that this agency might be able to supply to some of those smaller water agencies should they be impacted by the fires. I don't know yet that those evacuated areas have been touched by fire, but it's possible that they have been or will be, and we might consider reaching out to those water agencies or water companies, or however you want to call them, at least to let them know that we could be here to support them in some ways if we needed to. I feel like that's part of our responsibility, even though we aren't directly managing those water systems. Also, I was informed yesterday by Ms. Baca that 2 events for Aqua Region, I think it's Region 1 and Region 5's events, are now listed on the Aqua Events webpage. The first Aqua Region 1 is in Windsor, which is right in Sonoma County. It looks like a very full and interesting program. And then I believe it's Region 5 is includes San Francisco and includes a 2-day program, which is not fully fleshed out yet as far as I can tell, but involves the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. It involves, of course, Hetch Hetchy, which is the water supply system for San Francisco, as well as fire protection in that area that receives Hetch Hetchy water. And so I'd encourage the rest of my fellow board members to at least look at the website, see if those might be programs you would be interested in attending. Those will be both in September. And with that, I will move on to, let's see, we'll take a break because we're coming to the end of the public portion of this meeting, and we will be moving into closed session. And if we could be there at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Recording stop.
I can report that there was no actionable item taken in closed session, and with that, we can adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.